What's good, everybody? This is Jay, and this is my true story for Stanley Tookie Williams. Now, this right here, this video is going to be a breakdown of the life and death of Stanley Tookie Williams, one of the founding members of the Crips gang in California. Now, this is based off of interviews and testimony of people that he knew, so hit that like, bang that bell, subscribe if you're new, sit back, relax, and I'm gonna break it on down about Stanley Tookie Williams. Now, we know that he was a founding member of the Crips. Now, Tookie was born December 29th, 1953 in Shreveport, Louisiana. His mom later moved the family to LA looking for a better job and ended up settling in the South Central area. Now, South Central was all black at the time, and a lot of people wanted the name Tookie, but it was given to him by his mom. It was said that his grandpa was named Tookie, and his dad was also a Tookie, so it's a family name, but nobody ever called him Stanley. He was bullied by some older kids when he was younger, but he beat them up and started to earn their respect. He even spent some time in juvie as a kid. In 1969, a 16-year-old Tookie was arrested on charges of auto theft and sent to Los Padrinos Juvie Hall. That's where he had learned his passion for weightlifting. His rep for fighting and size started to get well known, and he became known as a monster. He had began a clique, and it began to grow, and they would clash with rival cliques that would later become sets. And 71 was a game-changing moment for Tookie. Bob Creer, an original West Side Crip member, remembers what happened. He said that they got into a fight with Raymond Washington from the East Side. He said the 110 freeway runs down the middle of LA and splits it east and west. He said Raymond Washington was east side, and they got to know each other and eventually joined up. They founded the Crips, quickly becoming the street gang in South Central. In the beginning, they were more helpful and not so much about selling drugs, according to Bob Creer. They did do wrong, but was about neighborhood protection more so, and not about killing. They eventually grew their clique by walking neighborhood to neighborhood, recruiting people. And they grew to Compton, Inglewood, and South Central. And as they grew, they began to get police attention. Now, the LA Police Department created an anti-gang unit deal with the growing Crips. Ken Bell was in the very first anti-gang unit. He said they paid attention to Tookie from the very start. His reputation was large at the time and included violence, according to Ken Bell. He became known for taking what he wanted. According to Bob Creer, he said that once Tookie saw a guy walking with a boombox, and he ended up knocking dude out and took the box. He said, "I'm gonna take it," and he did. Now, Fred Shaw Jr. spoke about his father, Fred Shaw Sr., who had group homes. He said that he gave jobs to gang leaders as counselors, and that Tookie was one of the counselors, and not only was he one of the counselors, but he was one of the best counselors they had. He said kids would listen and look up to him, and Tookie was even able to help the kids with homework. He still gangbanged at night, according to Bob Creer, and he said that he also started taking bodybuilding more seriously at the time. Jamel Barnes was a founding Crip member and bodybuilder, and Tookie and Jamel both became known for their bodies. Jamel wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger to sponsor Tookie for the new Mr. Olympia competition. According to Jamel, Tookie met with Arnold, flexed for him, said after he flexed with him, "Nah, I don't want it. I'm going back to the hood. I'm good." And Jamel said he couldn't believe what he just saw and heard when he did that. Tookie, his ex-wife, said he was hood famous and felt he could whoop the world and didn't need that. He was famous not only for being a founder member of the Crips at the time, but also for his size and his physique. In his early 20s, he even went on the Gong Show. McBride said the gang unit laughed at him, but never in his face. He said gang members didn't laugh in his face either. Tookie was a very serious dude. Tookie began to lift weights more serious. He would go to clubs and parties and show off his physique for the ladies, and all the ladies loved him. No men in the hood had the size like Tookie back in the late and early 70s. Tookie began to smoke Sherm because he said it gave him strength and he could just keep lifting. PCP, aka Sherm, gave him super strength, and he used to smoke dip squares in the Sherm, and he eventually became addicted. He eventually needed more money, began to rob dope men, and also commit crimes. His ex said he began to growl like a pit bull when that monster was about to come up out of him. She also said that people tend to lose their mind when they on Sherm. Ken Bell said people would say, looks like Took is slipping, and he began to change. He lost his job as a counselor eventually, and his idol that he looked up to was Al Capone. But unlike Capone, Tookie needed to make income. Now, Tookie had a long rap sheet by this time, including assault with a deadly weapon, grand theft auto, loaded firearms, 3 robbery charges, and the Crips during this time grew from 3 sets to 45 sets. He could go to any set and get what he wanted, but he still didn't have income and he needed cash. February 28th, 1979, he got a robbery crew together and they went to a 7-Eleven. He sends in 2 of the crew allegedly, and a guy named Daryl and Tony Sims went inside. Now, Albert Owens was the clerk at that 7-Eleven, and he found those 2 trying to rob the register. Allegedly, Tookie and Blackie Coward into the store. Tookie puts the gun in the back of the clerk, and he took him to the back of the store. He said, "This is how you don't leave witnesses," and shot him 2 times in the back, allegedly. Owens was making noises after he was shot as he was dying, and allegedly Tookie laughed. The total amount of money that they received from that robbery was $120. On the morning of March 11, 1979, Tookie allegedly killed 3 members of the Yang family. He killed the father and mother first, and the daughter, who was 40 years old, had half her head blown off with a shotgun. They allegedly only got $100 for that crime at this motel. The only evidence police found was 1 spent shotgun shell. The cops needed the streets' help in order to solve these crimes. Now, the 2 robberies with 4 people killed and little evidence left behind was very frustrating for the cops. According to Ken Bell, he said people on the street began to say it was Tookie. Now, Fred Shaw Jr. said Tookie was so famous in the hood that other people began to use his name. He was accused of things that he didn't do quite often. Other gang members called themselves Lil Tookie and Baby Tookie, etc. His friend and sometimes roommate James Garrett gave police a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun. He said Tookie bragged to him about the killings, and police got statements from Blackie Coward and Tony Sims. Both implicated Tookie as the trigger man. The cops thought it was going to be an open and shut case at first, but Garrett was awaiting sentence for extortion and receiving stolen property. Blackie was offered immunity for testimony despite a rap sheet for armed robberies with 1 in front of the Brookhaven Hotel. The shotgun was also questionable. The forensic evidence came back inconclusive. In the second round of tests, only 2 of 18 test fires yielded markings partially similar to the crime scene. More precise testing that did exist at the time was for some reason not done. Some people smell foul play. Bobby Creer said when he heard Tookie was busted for murder and how the murders were committed, he didn't believe it was him. He said he thinks the cops set him up because they didn't like who he was and what he represented. Fred Shaw Jr. said that everyone on the streets knew he didn't do the robbery in the store. He says the real story is he was in the back seat of the car, whacked out on Sherm, and was unable to do it even if he wanted to. Now, with testimony from the 2 criminals, but no DNA evidence and flimsy ballistic evidence, the prosecution sought out the death penalty. Many felt it was because he was a gang leader and they wanted to make an example out of him. He was found guilty by a jury on 4 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances. The sentence was death. Even though there were multiple perpetrators in both circumstances who were all known Crips, all the others got around 7 years or immunity, but only one received the death penalty, and that was Tookie, based on circumstantial evidence at that. Former DA Steve Cooley said the murders were very gratuitous of innocent people, and Tookie seemed to be a sick individual because he laughed. Tookie ended up going to death row at San Quentin. He began going through appeals for years and claimed incompetent defense, prosecutorial misconduct, lack of physical evidence, and when Tookie entered prison, he was on a level 1 inmate, meaning a major shot caller. He was a boss. He had much love and respect from all the other inmates, and cops said that he still ran the Crips from inside the prison. Ken said it was important for him to keep an eye on Tookie even after being put in prison. Tookie had influence that could get things done on the streets if he gave the word because of his heavyweight shot caller status. He was convicted in 1981, and he did get in trouble in jail, according to reports. He attacked mates, attacked guards. He ordered the stabbing of one inmate, threw chemicals at another inmate, and outside, Raymond Washington was murdered in a drive-by shooting in 1979. So with Tookie behind bars and Raymond Washington dead, the Crips began to splinter into different sets. At one point, it was 225 different Crip sets in LA. And of course, they didn't all get along. And by this time, selling drugs, crack, and cocaine made things worse. The crack had brought in big money in the hood. At one point, the Crip on Crip murder rate was 3 times higher than Crip on blood. Original West Side Crips were old school fist fighters, according to Bob Creer. But the drugs made things out of control with guns and money, and old school Bobby Creer said, hell, he's even scared of Crips now. Now, while on death row, Tookie was attacked by another inmate. A member of the Crips attacked him with a knife and slashed his neck. It was at this time that things began to change for Tookie. He was put in solitary confinement for his own safety indefinitely. Tookie said there he was able to read and reflect on his past. He said that he read books on sociology, philosophy, and history, to name a few. He said in a gradual and piecemeal fashion, he eventually changed his life. He met up with a woman named Barbara Becknell when she interviewed him for a book on gang history. She gave him a public platform to speak. He told her he wanted to help kids and eventually began to write children's books. He said every gang member should be apologizing to their friends and families for all the madness that has been created on the streets. By the late 80s, gang life was being glorified with music and movies. Tookie, with Bagnell, published many children's books and even wrote books about his experience. He eventually began to negotiate a peace treaty between gang sets, and he wanted to make peace and work on peace his main mission. Fred Shaw Jr. thinks he really did make a change and want peace, and said he heard about some things in prison that happened and that Tookie didn't seek retaliation. He said he heard that he could have got the guy who stabbed him but chose not to. On the other hand, Sergeant McBride didn't believe it and said it was all a front. He said the books were ghost written for Tookie, and also D.A. Cooley said he felt Tookie was faking it. He said his books were dedicated to people who were activists, but they were also dedicated to prisoners behind bars accused of killing cops. George Jackson from the Black Guerrilla family murdered a prison guard. Leonard Peltitt, American Indian Movement, murder of 2 FBI agents. Mumia Abu Jamal, the reporter, murder of a cop. And Assata Shakur, the Black Liberation Army, murder of a state trooper. The DA said it would be smart not to dedicate books to cop killers if you were about peace. In 2000, a member of the Swiss parliament, Mario Fair, nominated Tookie for the Nobel Peace Prize for all of his anti-gang work. He was nominated eventually 5 more times for a total of 6 times. The DA said that didn't mean anything and anyone could nominate anyone for the prize. The DA said that Hitler and Stalin were even nominated for the prize. So a lot of people in the police world were not buying Tookie's transformation. And unfortunately for Tookie, he never won the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, he did get a lot of attention from Hollywood, and in 2000, Jamie Foxx made a movie called Redemption. It was a made-for-TV movie, and it was nominated for a Golden Globe. His fight to avoid death penalty got new momentum with the movie and national attention. Snoop said that the movie changed him. He had people like Jim Brown, Snoop, Winnie Mandela, Jamie Foxx, and more now fighting for him to avoid the death penalty. Prosecutor Martin said Tookie never admitted that he was a murderer and therefore didn't believe that Tookie was redeemed. In October 2005, the Supreme Court denied to hear his case. It came down to him needing to win clemency from the governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, no one in California had clemency since 1967. His ex-wife felt he was rehabilitated. Attorney General Campbell felt the rehab came too late to justify mercy for his crimes. Some thought Crips would kill guards if he was killed. His execution date was set for December 13th, 2005. Now, Arnold Schwarzenegger made history on December 8th, 2005 because he held a 1-hour closed-door meeting to review the final request Tookie had for his life. What made this historical is because normally these appeals are conducted with paperwork, but Arnold wanted to actually talk to the people on both sides and hear them out, and he had spoke with both lawyers. Normally, that would never happen, but this was new, and he gave both sides a chance to explain their case. According to the DA, the big moment came when they showed Arnold the books that were written and dedicated to cop killers. The lawyers were unprepared and they did not read the books and didn't know about that. Arnold was watching them scramble right before his eyes, and eventually when it was over, Arnold wrote a statement and said after hearing both sides, he could find no justification for clemency. The Terminator terminated. A couple hundred people were outside, and he didn't want any family members to come to this event. He told his wife he was tired and maybe it was meant for him to die. Shaw Jr. said when they asked him why he thinks this was happening, he said, karma. 50 witnesses were at the execution, including 17 members of the news media. At 12:01 a.m., he came in the death chamber. He said he doesn't want to die, but if your time is up, then it's up. They say he looked all the witnesses in the eye. His witnesses pumped their fist and said, "Tookie!" Media said he had a stern gaze at them. But Shaw Jr. said that at this time in his life, he wore glasses and wasn't able to see that well, so he was trying to squint so that he could see everyone. While they were trying to prepare him for the lethal injection because of his size and physique, even at his age, they had trouble finding his vein, and they ended up poking him more than once. He eventually asked them if they knew what they were doing. Eventually, they got him into the death chamber and they administered the lethal injection. His breathing became shallow. He looked peaceful when he passed, according to witnesses. He was declared dead at 12:35 Pacific time. When he died, 3 of his witnesses yelled, "The state has just killed an innocent man." There was no unrest when he died, and Bobby Creer said he went out like a soldier, but it hurt his heart. He said cops think he was nothing special and just another thug, and it was the right decision, but he disagreed as well as many others. It's a sad end to somebody that had a lot of potential. Tookie was once presented to Arnold Schwarzenegger as the next Mr. Olympia. He was an inspiration to many young men and became the leader of the Crips. He could have done many things with his life, but unfortunately, he ended up being led astray, and this is what happened to him. Many people believe that he did turn over a new leaf and become somebody focused on peace, but we do not know for sure. He was nominated 6 times for a Nobel Peace Prize, but also who knows what could have happened with his life had he not ended up in jail. It's unfortunate 4 people lost their lives. It's never been proven without a shadow of a doubt that Tookie did it, and he never, ever admitted that he killed those people. In the end, it's another cautionary tale about what you could or could not do and what you could and couldn't be possibly in life. And I hope that this actually was very informative. This video is made based off of interviews and documentaries that I watched, and if there is any information that is not in here, it is for time constraints. Please hit this like, subscribe, enjoy the video. Keep in mind, this is a short recap of a person that lived a long life and was very complex. So, for time constraints, every single detail will not be in here, but you do get the majority of the information. I'm Jay. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe. Peace, and I'm out. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit that like, subscribe, bang that bell, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.